Yo guys, come back to our channel, a really exciting place for those of you who like films in a relaxed style and full of laughter. Usually we discuss films full of action or comedy, but this time it's a bit different. We will talk about a film that is much more serious, called The Insult, which was released in 2017. This is a drama film that will make your brain think hard, your heart mixed, and maybe make you think, my life is that complicated, isn't it? This film is from Lebanon and raises quite sensitive themes about pride, disputes, and small incidents that can turn into big problems. I happen to have an opinion that I still practice to this day. Problems actually won't be problems if we don't worry about them. Come on, let's start the plot of this film. The story begins in Beirut, Lebanon. We are introduced to the two main characters, Toni Hana, a devout Christian car mechanic, and Yasser Salameh, a Palestinian refugee who works as a construction project foreman. Toni is listening to a speech by an extreme right-wing Christian politician who is full of frustration about the existence of Palestinian refugees. This speech is an illustration of Toni's attitude towards Palestinians, whom he considers a threat. This gives an initial idea of Toni's beliefs and background. But if you think about it, it's also a mess. Never mind, I hate it. Listening to stove content. How can my heart not get hotter every day? I don't think here is any belly dance content in Lebanon. Try it, for people like Toni out there. Watch more belly dance content to calm down a bit. Well, continue. On the other hand, Yasser is an old man who is working hard on a road renovation project. When the construction crew got close to the building where Toni lived, Yasser saw that a water pipe was leaking from Toni's balcony. The water was splashing onto the street. This was clearly a violation of the regulations. Yasser tried to offer to fix the pipe for free. But Toni, who has hatred towards construction workers, because Toni knows that the majority of his workers come from Palestinian refugees, immediately rejected Yasser's offer. Rudely and even slammed the balcony door. I am confused too. It's free. Unless you force me to fix it and make you pay, maybe I'll throw this Yasser from the balcony. Even though he was rejected, Yasser still fixed the pipe because he felt that was what he had to do. When Toni found out, he was very angry and even broke the pipe that Yasser had repaired. The tension got worse when Yasser blurted out, "You bastard!" Toni felt really insulted and responded with hateful words. After the commotion on the balcony, Toni still felt insulted by Yasser's words. Toni, who is stubborn and holds a grudge, comes to the construction company where Yasser works. There, he demanded an apology from Yasser for his remarks. However, Yasser, who felt he was innocent, refused to apologize. This tension peaked when Toni increasingly provoked Yasser with hateful statements. When Toni insults him with derogatory words, "I wish Ariel Sharon killed you all." Yasser, who felt his self-esteem had been trampled on, was Yasser's trigger, and finally Toni's stomach was hit by sports greetings, Jabrit. This incident caused Toni to be injured and had to be rushed to hospital. Toni's 2 ribs were broken. At the hospital, Toni was given the opportunity to report Yasser to the police for assault. It's already like playing the victim. Because in my opinion, the sentence, "I wish Ariel Sharon killed you all," is really bad. The highest level of insult, because it's no joke what happened there. Genocide. If Toni says F you, or you dog, or MF word, or other ordinary adult words, then Yasser is banging. Yasser is being crazy. Okay, continue. Toni reported the police. The police said that the police could not detain people from refugee camps. It's a political issue, he said, but Toni still insisted. Days later, after considering it, Yasser surrendered himself to the police. This is really cool, really a gentle man. Proceed to lower level proceedings. Both Toni and Yasser attended the trial without a lawyer. Here Toni is asked by the judge, "Why are you suing Yasser?" Toni said that Yasser hit Toni until he broke 2 ribs. The judge asked the origin of their conflict. The judge asked if Toni's water disposal was against the law. Yasser wants to fix it. Why is it rejected? Toni said his wife was pregnant. Toni felt uncomfortable having other people enter her house. Then the judge continued to ask Toni, why was the Paralon that was repaired by Yasser damaged? Toni couldn't answer. Here, the judge was able to judge that basically Toni had a hatred towards Palestinian refugees. Both of them were asked by the judge, why was there a beating incident? Strangely, Yasser doesn't want to say anything. Toni would also be embarrassed if he said that Toni had said those evil words in court. Because he felt deadlocked and there was not enough evidence, the judge decided to dismiss the case. Toni, who is not satisfied, wants an appeal. Because of this conflict, Toni was tired and fainted. Toni's wife was shocked to see Toni passed out in the workshop. Due to shock, Toni's wife gave birth prematurely. This is what makes Toni even more fiery. On the other hand, because the foreman employed refugees illegally, Yasser was fired from his job. Oh yes. This relationship between two lawyers is a bit funny. Wajdi and Nadine are father and daughter. Wajdi is Toni's lawyer and Nadine is Yasser's lawyer. The trial becomes a battle between two lawyers who have different views. Toni's lawyer, who is experienced, said that Toni was the victim of an unacceptable physical attack, while Yasser's lawyer argued that Yasser was just a spontaneous response to a long-standing insult. Wajdi often uses his rhetoric and political experience to build arguments that influence public opinion, while Nadine, with a more empathetic and modern approach, tries to show that this dispute is an opportunity for reconciliation, not to deepen the divide. As the trial progresses, Toni and Yasser's backgrounds are revealed. Toni Hanna's character in The Insult is a Lebanese Christian whose family experienced deep trauma due to the Lebanese Civil War that occurred in 1975-1990. Specifically, Toni was a victim of an internal civil war involving various groups, including Palestinian factions. This background is important because of the massacres by Palestinian militias in Christian villages during the war. Toni became like this. Although the film does not explicitly depict the details of his tragic past, dialogue and emotional flashbacks tell the audience that Toni and his family were once victims of atrocities committed by groups associated with Palestine. It was the trauma of the war that caused Toni to have a hard attitude towards the Palestinian community, including Yasser, even though Yasser himself had nothing to do with this past incident. From here we get the idea that Toni reflects some of the Lebanese people who still bear the wounds of this very complex conflict. On the other hand, Yasser is a talented engineer who was forced to leave his homeland due to conflict. As a refugee, he faces discrimination every day, including from people like Toni, who see him as a social burden. Yasser also faces an emotional test. He must defend himself as an individual unconnected to past crimes, while enduring the stigma of being a Palestinian refugee who is often considered an undesirable immigrant in Lebanon. This case received massive media coverage, so the public's attention was divided. Some Toni and Yasser support Toni, seeing him as a citizen whose rights must be protected. Meanwhile, Yasser's supporters view this case as a representation of the injustices that Palestinian refugees often experience. The next day, Toni's lawyer brings historical evidence of atrocities committed by several Palestinian groups during the Lebanese Civil War, trying to justify Toni's distrust of them. This argument sparked great emotion in court, with the audience divided between those who defended the rights of Palestinian refugees and those who supported Toni on the basis of Lebanese patriotism. Wajdi was even shouted at by Zionist henchmen by the trial participants. In an emotional moment, an eyewitness to the Civil War is brought forward to give testimony. This witness told how her family was massacred during the conflict by militias linked to Palestinian refugees. His testimony illustrates the deep trauma experienced by the Toni community, strengthening the argument that historical wounds still impact relations between communities. However, not long after that, a Palestinian man gave testimony about how his family lost everything when they fled their homeland and had to face stigma in the countries where they lived. The story depicts suffering that is no less profound, creating balance in the narrative of this conflict. Outside the courtroom, the divisions were even more pronounced. Demonstrations that were initially peaceful began to turn into clashes between the two camps. Police stepped in to control the crowd, but tensions remained high. News about the trial dominated the media, amplifying hateful rhetoric and adding to the rift in society.
Can you imagine? Initially, the water pipe problem could cause chaos in a country. And what's worse, this case was used as a tool for politicians to seek influence. The media also has high ratings. You know yourself, the media really likes to publish news like this. Riots everywhere. Toni's family is terrorized via prank phone calls. Toni's workshop in the image of the Israeli logo. The two of them were even summoned to the Lebanese presidential palace. Told them both to be nice. Both of them still refuse to get better. The president here says that the country's stability is shaky because of your actions, because of a dead end. The two of them went home. T here is a touching scene here. Funny, but touching. The two of them seem to be racing towards their respective cars. Because they were parked next to each other, one of them had to give in because they couldn't open the car doors at the same time. Well, Toni's car starts and pulls out first. Yasser's car won't start. Toni peeked in the rearview mirror. Hey, Toni is back again to help Yasser. Calming scene, minimal conversation. Toni said, "Get in." Yasser got into his car. Then Toni touched the engine of Yasser's car, then said, "Start it." Yasser's car is normal again, Toni pulled out. Yasser smiles. I mean, to be honest, I have teary eyes on this scene. Minimal conversation, but very deep meaning. I am actually really sure that these two men don't really want to cause a stir in one country. In one of the most touching scenes, Toni and Yasser are finally forced to talk face to face without the interference of lawyers or the media. When Yasser comes to Toni's workshop, he appears to be doing something that could be considered provocative. But his real intent is to express his anger and frustration. Toni, who also felt insulted and disturbed by this dispute, finally vented his frustration by giving Yasser a sports greeting. This action shows that Toni, although trying to appear strong and tough, is not immune to the growing emotional pressure. Instead of responding with violence or hatred, Yasser chose to defuse the situation with an apology. This shows a level of emotional maturity and magnanimity, even though he is also at a disadvantage. By apologizing, Yasser admitted that this conflict had hurt them both. He may have wanted to show that they do not need to be enemies who continue to be trapped in a cycle of hatred. Yasser's departure after apologizing reflects his desire to end the conflict in a peaceful way, even though the situation remains not completely resolved. Yasser chose to leave a situation that could trigger more violence. This shows that even though he felt provoked, he didn't want to make things worse. After Yasser leaves, Toni is left to reflect on her actions. This gives Toni space to rethink their conflict and perhaps see the human side of Yasser, not just as an opponent. In court, the judge concluded that both Toni and Yasser were guilty, but neither was punished. Yasser was at fault for physically attacking Toni, and Toni was at fault for uttering insults that sparked the conflict. Although this decision did not completely satisfy both Toni and Yasser, it was a small step towards understanding. The film closes with a scene of both Toni and Yasser smiling at each other, with music that is very fitting for the closing scene of the film. This film highlights the emotional side and trauma that never ends, as well as how history and pride can be the root of long-lasting problems. During the trial, we see Toni and Yasser starting to reflect on themselves. They both began to realize that the hatred they carried was more about old wounds than personal problems. This film teaches important lessons about identity, pride, and how the past often really influences our actions in the present. So, even though this film is not the lightest, there are definitely many lessons we can take from situations that seem trivial, but are actually more complex. Honestly, in my opinion, there should be more films with themes like this. Film with a theme of unity, not a theme of division. So, If you like this content, don't forget to click like and subscribe. If you have opinions or questions, just write them in the comments column. If you were one of the characters in this film, what would you do? See you in the next video. Keep it relaxed, keep it fun, and remember, life isn't always black and white. Bye.